Welcome to our class on Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. Last time we discussed B, self-consciousness. Today we will take up CAA, reason, and its first section, A, observing reason, and make our transition to B, active reason, and C, practical reason. CAA, reason. Hegel tells us that, quote, reason is the certainty of consciousness that it is all reality, end quote. But what exactly does this mean? And how and when is it reached and realized? Now, we have said two things. First, that B, self-consciousness, or the concept, is the end of the book. All that remains to be done is to transfer the remaining objects of consciousness into the concept. And second, that this happens when self-consciousness and consciousness become one or unified, which happens in the Phenomenology's last division, Part C, and it occurs 4 times and in 4 forms, as reason, spirit, religion, and absolute knowing. The final unification takes place in absolute knowing and is called the absolute concept. And it results from the achievement of the reciprocal recognition, which is absolute spirit. It is the I equal I of self-consciousness, where 2 selves recognize each other. And it is this which provides the key to the whole phenomenology. Now, 4 points that will answer our 2 questions and also help us understand the entire phenomenology. 1. Reciprocal recognition, the key to the book, is a unity of consciousness and self-consciousness where object and self are one. I am relating to an object which is at the same time myself. This is infinity and the unity of opposites. In short, quote, I am you and me at the same time or equally, and you are me and you equally at the same time, end quote. Yet, I am one, a unity. I am a unity of opposites. I am the universal, all. I exist here and also there, outside myself, in and as you. And this is precisely what Hegel calls spirit. The one consciousness, or I, which splits into 2. In Hegel's words, quote, the reconciling yes, in which the 2 I's let go their opposed existence, is the existence of the I, which has expanded into a duality. It is a reciprocal recognition, which is absolute spirit or God, end quote. Again, we are both each other at the same time. As Hegel says, quote, I regard them, other people, as myself and myself as them, end quote. More strongly, at Encyclopedia 159, Hegel says, quote, thinking, or the concept, means that in the other I meet with myself, and that I, the concept, recognize you as my own being and creation, end quote. Yet, as Hegel also says, quote, I only really exist in and for myself insofar as you recognize me as really existing in and for myself, end quote. And yet, you, who are equally the concept, also recognize me as your own being and creation. That is, in reality, on the metaphysical level, I am you and you are me. I am at once my own being, because you recognize me, and your own being, and vice versa. In the Encyclopedia, Hegel calls this universal self-consciousness. Also, you will find this all-crucial truth explicated in a powerful recognition meditation exercise, which can be done between 2 or more people, in my book, The Jedi Handbook of Global Education, on page 274, which in my view will help deepen your understanding of the phenomenology and of absolute knowledge. 2. It is also important to know that reciprocal recognition, the goal of the phenomenology, is not achieved in part B, self-consciousness, in the master-slave dialectic, nor is it achieved in part C, reason, where the self or consciousness is all reality. It is only achieved at the end of spirit, in part C, in evil and forgiveness. Thus you may wonder why it wasn't achieved in part C, reason, where the self is all reality, both itself and its object. The following will shed light on this. The key thing is that recognition requires not one but 2 selves or I's who reciprocally recognize each other. Thus, in part A, consciousness, we have just one I. In part B, self-consciousness, we begin with one I as desire, then have 2 I's in master-slave recognition, and end with just one I in freedom of self-consciousness. Part C, reason, begins with only one I in A, observing reason. Then we have 2 I's in reasons B, the actualization of rational self-consciousness, and also 2 I's in reason C, individuality which takes itself as real, where we achieve a universal individual, unity, and transition to part C, spirit, where we first have a nation or community of I's whose essence is a reciprocal recognition of all I's, but which is only achieved, as said, at the end in evil and forgiveness, with absolute spirit and God. Part C, religion, also implicitly has the truth of the reciprocal recognition of 2 I's, oneself and the God-man, but in the inadequate form of picture thinking, which is overcome in part C, absolute knowledge, in the absolute concept, in which all that preceded is aufgehoben, negated yet preserved, and which includes the 2 I's at the end of spirit, meaning that though the phenomenology ends with just one self, one knowing, one absolute concept, the 2 I's, indeed all I's, are included in this one I. CF, quote, it is I that is this and no other I, and at the same time a mediated or universal I, End quote. 3. Thus, as to why the goal of recognition was not achieved in C, reason, as the certainty of being all reality, a unity of consciousness and self-consciousness, the answer is that reason is only in itself or potentially the certainty of being all reality, not yet its actuality or actualization. Remember also that each shape, e.g. reason, always begins in its immediacy, oblivious to the stages that preceded. So we know that reason is all reality. It does not. It only intuits this. It begins only as the instinct of reason. Reason's actualization happens for the first time in C, spirit, in ethical life. That is, in a concrete, actual, historical nation of I's, as Hegel says. Quote, "It is in the life of a people or nation that the concept of reason's actualization has its complete reality." End quote. Hegel further says that reason is fully actualized, quote, "when I behold in the independence of the other complete unity with it, and have for my object the free thinghood of the other, and have him as my own being for myself." End quote. So, reason is fully actualized only in C, spirit, or the ethical life of a nation. And what again is spirit? Spirit is a, quote, universal self-consciousness that takes itself to be actual in another consciousness. And only in this unity with objective being is its self-consciousness, end quote. Spirit is thus a recognized and acknowledged self-consciousness which has its own self-certainty in the other free self-consciousness opposed to it, and has its truth precisely in that other, end quote. 4. For a correct understanding of the meaning of reason being the certainty of consciousness that it is all reality, one needs only to read Hegel's key statements in the opening section entitled, quote, "The Certainty and Truth of Reason," end quote, in which he distinguishes true from false idealism, defines reason as I am I, and connects all this with the category. Here are the key statements. Quote, "Reason is certain that everything actual is none other than itself. Reason's thinking is itself directly reality, its relationship to reality being that of idealism," end quote. Idealism's certainty that reason is all reality, Hegel says, is thus expressed. Quote, "I am I, in the sense that the I, which is an object for me, is the sole object, is all reality and all that is present," end quote. This I, which is all reality, and the sole truth is, quote, "not merely an object that withdraws itself from other objects which retain their worth alongside it," the view of false idealism and Hegelian realists. On the contrary, the I is an object such that any other object whatever is a non-being, end quote. This pretty much settles the issue. Realist Hegelians and commentators should also know that Hegel unequivocally states, quote, nature, matter, has vanished, end quote, and, quote, spirit indeed is the universal immateriality of matter, end quote. Not to mention, in the present section's end, that, quote, the thing is I, and the I is a thing, end quote. All crucial is the distinction between what we know, we who have gone through the development of consciousness, in A, consciousness, and B, self-consciousness, and what the shape of reason itself knows, which has just come on the scene in its immediacy after the Middle Ages and its unhappy consciousness. We know that only the I is reality, while it knows this only intuitively as, quote, the instinct of reason. Many commentators do not fully realize this important distinction and do not get what reason as all reality really means, that I am I, that the I is my only object, that all else is non-being, etc. It is just because Hegel says that reason, consciousness, is now, quote, interested in the world's permanence, etc., end quote, that they assume the world has true, independent being apart from the I. The only thing in the world, the not I, that possesses true, independent being are other I's or selves, which are equally the concept and all reality. So yes, there is in fact a reality absolutely independent of the I, knowing self-consciousness, but this independent reality is just another self-consciousness or another absolute concept. Again, Hegel takes pains to distinguish true from false idealism, for which an other than I exists. He clearly states that there are not two realities, the I and the world things. This is the false idealism Hegel criticizes. No. Hegel means what he says. Reason, consciousness, is literally all reality. Indeed, the absolute concept is all reality. Cf. The Science of Logic, 826, quote, the concept is alles, end quote. The purpose of the remainder of the book, see Reason, Spirit, Religion, Absolute Knowing, is precisely to show this, to show how the truth, reason, the I is all reality, gets actualized. Finally, it is in the category, i.e. of Kant, that all this comes together. And the category means that, quote, self-consciousness and being are the same essence, or are one and the same, end quote. Hegel adds tellingly that, quote, it is only the one-sided, spurious, or false idealism that lets this unity again come on the scene as consciousness on one side, confronted by an in itself on the other, end quote. An in itself, Hegel notes, called a thing in itself, anstos, or empirical entity.